It's time for Positively Kansas. Coming up, history is made once again in the air capital of the world. We'll journey along with a world record flight that took off and landed in Wichita. Also, friends and neighbors gather in McPherson to honor one of the town's most famous celebrities. He's a one-eyed wonder with a life lesson to share with all of us. And in our Kansas Wild Edge report, we'll learn about the fastest animals in the Western Hemisphere. And they live right here in Kansas. I'm Sierra Scott. Join us for a half hour of information and inspiration right now on Positively Kansas. Wichita becomes the beginning and ending of a great around-the-world record-setting flight. 5 aviators set out in a Wichita-built Learjet to recreate the first around-the-world westerly flight. Chris Frank has a story of the Century Mission flight celebrating that 100th anniversary.
See you, Wichita. We'll be back in a couple days.
And after some last-minute hugs, kisses, and goodbyes from friends and family, 5 aviators board the Learjet Model 36A. The time is closing in on midnight when Wednesday night, April 3rd, will turn to Thursday morning, April 4th. Bart Gray, shown here on the flight deck with co-pilot Joshua Podlich, prepares to start engines while local media and onlookers stand by. The door closes and won't be reopened in Wichita until the crew returns Saturday evening. And as the 5 on board, 4 pilots and 1 observer, settle in before takeoff, let's take some time to appreciate how such a trip required a great deal of planning to reach this point.
If the timing works out.
The team has had several pre-flight meetings, some virtual, some in person, going over the details. This is the 10th crew meeting. Bart Gray heads up discussions as the instigator of this circumnavigational flight. There are 11 refueling stops to plan for. Gray points out to crew members the necessity of meeting strict in and out times at those stops to stay on schedule.
I think we can be a little ahead of schedule and be sitting in Palau planning to take off to land in Singapore at the exact minute that 4 o'clock window opens.
These pilots are experienced flying international and have experienced some of the upcoming stops. This Learjet is owned by Global Jet Care. It's a worldwide air ambulance service. Bart Gray is company president, co-owner. The cabin is normally outfitted with a patient's bed and 2 flight attendant seats. Those were removed and a custom-made mattress added for this flight. Now the plane draws a lot of attention from those attending a pre-flight party. That celebration at the Lee Aerospace hangar at the Benton Airport, where flight memorabilia was sold as a fundraiser for the Learjet 23003 restoration.
Okay, 100. I will get you.
This whole community is like a quilt.
This is a great event, and it's a world record attempt and everything. But the main purpose we're doing all this is to raise funds for our 23003 here in Wichita.
Weber makes reference to this Learjet Model 23-003, which was featured in an earlier Positively Kansas story. It is unique as the first customer-delivered Learjet. The Classic Learjet Foundation is raising money to restore 003, and this Century Mission round-the-world flight is doing the same by drawing attention to the Learjet's restoration. Weber is a jet pilot, but his role on this flight is as official witness. And though Weber says he's looking forward to the flight, there's an aspect of it that makes him nervous.
I'm very apprehensive about spending that much time over the water. It's something that, even though I love airplanes and I love boats, I usually don't try to mix the two. So,
for now, his apprehension is put on hold as the excitement builds in Wichita with the plane taxiing away from the Bombardier Learjet Delivery Center.
The crew that I'm going with has so much experience to do this. They do it every day.
The 3 Global Jet Care pilots are used to flying overseas on medical flights. And then there's pilot John Bone, who's flown Learjets since age 20. The retired Delta Airlines pilot has flown around the world twice, once easterly, then westerly in his Cirrus plane. He knows what to expect.
I think our biggest threat for this flight is fatigue. And it's a long, even though there's 4 of us going and we've got some rest facilities, we're still going to be 55 hours if it goes as planned.
The Learjet makes a low pass as it takes off from Eisenhower Airport to begin its mission. To better appreciate this Century mission flight, it will serve viewers well to learn about that first world flight that began April 6, 1924. In the early 1920s, several countries were competing to become the first nation with a flight crew to circumnavigate the world. The U.S. Army Air Service put together a team of 8 pilots and mechanics using 4 airplanes to make an attempt.
You know, hats off to those guys. They were the pioneers of the circumnavigation. They, of course, had nothing to go off of. They were figuring it out as they went.
Consider some of the differences between what those 1924 aviators had to deal with and what today's aviators will deal with to circumnavigate the world. What's amazing is to think about all the spare airplane parts which had to be placed around the world in advance for that 1924 flight.
The Navy, the Coast Guard, the Bureau of Fisheries, I think, all these people months in advance were setting up supply depots.
The spares included 15 extra engines, 14 extra pontoon sets, and enough spare parts to build 2 more airplanes. It took that Army team 175 days, nearly 6 months, to complete their journey. They had 74 stops and covered 27,550 miles.
The majority of places they were flying, an airplane had never been.
Those 1924 Army aviators didn't have any services at their stops around the world.
But the hardest part is definitely the logistics, definitely getting everything set up. Every country and every place we fly over has their own little quirks, of the timing.
From Wichita, the Century crew makes its first stop in Salinas, California. From there, it's on to Hawaii, then the Marshall Islands, and then Palau. Crew members record video updates along the way, which get uploaded at each stop so followers can keep track.
We're en route now from Koror, which is in the Republic of Palau, on their way to Singapore.
Minimizing ground time was a challenge at some of the stops.
So many places are just not in a hurry to do anything. So, and to try to get them in a hurry when they just want to hang out with us a little bit was tough.
And then there was a request to sing Happy Birthday to Bart Gray in the early morning hours of April 6th.
Okay, today is Bart's birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
That's Sicily.
The crew is often asked, why go west into the wind instead of flying east with the wind? Gray says because a Learjet already holds the eastbound record, but not a westbound record until now. After Singapore, they had refueling stops in India, then Dubai on the Arabian Peninsula.
We're at 38,000 feet. We're just passing Riyadh in Saudi Arabia.
Next stops, Alexandria, Egypt, then Italy's island of Sardinia, and on to Portugal's Azores Island in the Atlantic. They were warmly welcomed on the Portuguese island, making the news in print and television.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
1924 fez a primeira circunnavegação aérea.
From the Azores, they crossed the Atlantic to Canada, their last stop before their final destination, Wichita. Their official landing was 7:16 p.m. April 6th. Wichita was living up to its windy reputation that evening. A large welcoming party greeted their arrival back where they started 2.5 days earlier. They were celebrated for their achievement.
We had a plan and we stuck to it. I mean, everybody did exactly what they were supposed to do, and we had a great time.
Gray's preliminary trip statistics say it took 54.5 hours to fly 20,008 miles. Add in the ground time for a total of 66 hours.
We had zero maintenance issues the whole way, and couldn't have worked out any better. So,
what took months, several planes, numerous engines, and other plane parts to accomplish in 1924 took a few days in 2024.
we joked when we taxied in, we said, well, we beat them by 172 days, so not bad for 100 years of progress.
And now, this crew and their supporters continue their overall efforts to raising funds for the restoration of Learjet 23-003 and to see that the legacy which started in Wichita continues. This is Chris Frank reporting for Positively Kansas.
The last Learjet built was delivered on March 28, 2022. Of the 3,000 made, 2,000 are still flying. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and species for that matter. Friends and fans recently gathered to celebrate a major milestone in the life of a furry, four-legged Kansas hero. His name is Wink, the one-eyed wonder. Jim Grayway shows us why Wink's life has had such an impact on the lives of Kansans of all ages.
A simple truth of life is that nobody's perfect.
In spite of what the graduation speakers say every spring, our town's pretty average.
It's also true that you don't have to let your imperfections hold you back.
Jim Anderson has a bad ear, but that doesn't keep him from playing on the football team. County champions last year, too.
Everybody has something to overcome, whether you're a person.
Dorothy Westerly has a tooth that needs fixing, but she's in good health, I'd say.
Hey,
or a pet.
Let's go for a walk. We're going to go for a walk. Come on.
In case you've never come across him, this is Wink, the one-eyed wonder.
You're one-eyed wonder. Honey. You're one-eyed wonder.
It is his 16th birthday.
The party is beginning.
This is quite a milestone, considering that Wink may not have even seen his first birthday were it not for Annette Carr.
To make the front page above the fold. Now that's, that says something.
And veterinarian Mark Handlin.
Wink was in a litter of puppies, and he was born with a small eye. We call it microphthalmia. So it was a non-functional eye.
The breeder, not seeing any market for such an imperfect dog, gave the miniature poodle to Dr. Handlin, who removed the eye, and then called Carr, a longtime client of his.
I had lost my dog in January, and I was not interested in puppydom. In fact, I really never liked French poodles. And, Mark said, why don't you meet this dog? And I did, and I just fell in love with him.
So, just like that, Wink had a home. But Carr, who's a massage therapist, didn't want to leave the puppy home alone during the day, so she started bringing him to work.
Because he was coming to work with me, he had a little fan base, and that's when it got started. And then more and more people got to know Wink, and he became a little celebrity. And then that's when this friend had suggested that I write the book about him.
Her children's book, Wink the One-Eyed Wonder, tells the story of Wink's disability and his adoption into a loving home. For years, Carr has been taking Wink to elementary schools and other gatherings to teach an important life lesson.
I would tell the children about Lassie and how Lassie was a hero. And I said, well, would you want Wink to be pulling you out of a burning building? Oh, no. And so then I would read the book, and I would let them learn how he is a hero by his self-acceptance of himself and telling others.
Kids relate to animals So I think they really relate to Wink and Wink's message. Kids compare themselves to each other, and if there's something about them that's even slightly different, they feel like maybe they're not quite as good as. And I think Wink's message is, you don't have to be perfect.
It still takes the right messenger, though, and Wink took on the responsibility like a champ.
He's been a good sport. I mean, we've gone to schools where one time when we spent the morning and there was about 200 children that came up and petted him. Now, not every dog would be that available.
While they're not as big as celebrities as Wink, Dr. Handlin has rescued several other dogs since that live happy lives with disabilities. Some are easy to spot, others are not. His cockapoo, Tater, was born with only one ear canal. Handlin says Tater is no less a great pet than the most pristine specimen. And he does just fine with one functional ear.
Well, unless he doesn't want to answer me. And then he's like a child, yeah. He ignores me. But life is good if you're my dog.
And for 16 years, Wink has lived his best life and encouraged others to do the same.
Wink is an inspiration to everyone. Yes, I know, Winky. I love you too. Wink is an inspiration to everyone. He just exudes joy and happiness. But I always say that Wink is just a manifestation of Annette. Her spirit is in this dog. Because Annette has joy and peace and kindness in her heart, and she just spreads it around to everyone.
Only one person ever has asked me, is Wink, how much of Wink's story is my story? And when I was a child, I was hit by a car and I had a brain injury, which led to epilepsy. I learned that even though I wasn't perfect, I was loved and I was worth $1 million.
And that message has been shared with class after class of youngsters in the McPherson area.
I run into people, adults, who we visited their class. And they're, you know, it blows me away. It just blows me away. Because they'll come up and they go, oh, I love Wink. And I go, how do you know Wink? You know, and they go, oh, you were in my second grade class. And you know, I mean, these are adults, working adults.
It's a message as important now as ever.
So take yourself as you are, and instead of expecting yourself to be perfect.
Sometimes it just takes a one-eyed wonder to make people see that no matter their flaws or disabilities, they are worth $1 million. In McPherson for Positively Kansas, I'm Jim Grayway.
At 16, Wink has outlived the average lifespan of French poodles, which is 13 to 15 years. He and Annette still do occasional public events, but he is now mostly retired. Well, if you saw the PBS Kansas documentary, Kansas from Above, Cities and Towns, you know how the city of Derby exploded in growth in the 1950s and 60s. As a result, there's very little left of the little old town that it once was. An exception is the original public school, which is now a museum. It's turning 100 years old. Anthony Powell shows us how this anniversary is an opportunity to shine the spotlight on Derby's interesting history.
In this fast-paced world in which we live, there is something very calming and, of course, nostalgic about visiting a good old-fashioned sturdy brick building like the Derby Historical Museum. Step inside and you'll find a very festive atmosphere, with 2024 marking a very special birthday for this landmark.
The building that we're celebrating was actually built in 1923-24. They finished it, had the first classes in the building in 1924. It was the school for Derby. High school was upstairs, grade school was downstairs.
The last high school graduating class here was in 1952, because by that time, McConnell Air Force Base was under construction. Derby was growing, and a new high school was built. The impact aviation and the military has had on Derby is reflected throughout the historical museum. On the day we visited, a military room was open to the public.
This was a 1/32nd scale.
We also caught a presentation by longtime Derby resident and aviation enthusiast Jim Miller, who discussed his passion for building model airplanes while giving out tips for anyone interested in the hobby.
And you often have to do a little filing, nail file, emery board,
Back in 2023, Miller donated his World War II model airplane collection to the museum. He started constructing the models in the late 70s and kept on building for the next 45 years or so. Miller says the model airplane hobby is one that teaches discipline and tenacity.
When you start out, you have a box full of plastic parts, some so-so instructions.
It's also provided him a way to celebrate a passion that began as a very young boy.
When I was about 4 years old, we lived about 5 miles west of the Hutchinson Naval Air Station, which was quite active during World War II and after that for a number of years. And I used to be out playing in the yard and see these cadets flying over in their Stearman biplanes, which at that time were little yellow biplanes with tandem seating. And I would shoot at them with my little Tommy gun, and they would waggle their wings at me.
On this day, we also learned so much about Derby's evolution as a city. It's now more than 150 years old.
It does have a long history. It was scratched out of the prairie in 1871, and so the first 80 years of its existence, however, it only had about a 200 population. So it was a very, very small farming community.
Of course, it was the aviation industry and the military that changed all of that, beginning with Boeing Wichita.
Boeing got a contract to build the B-47, and they decided to build that at the Wichita plant. So in order to do that, they had to bring about 20,000 people to town to staff their apartments. There was no place to live. Nothing had been built for decades.
Seeing that need, Derby leaders stepped up and paved the way for their city to grow, starting with McConnell, that was constructed as a training facility for pilots of the B-47.
In 1950 and 1960, Derby's population multiplied by a factor of 12, which made it the fastest growing community percentage-wise in the country at the time.
Today, it is the state's 17th largest city. So from learning about the historical museum's role as Derby's first school, to the impact aviation and the military has had on Derby, making the city one of the fastest growing in all of Kansas. You can find it all here at this treasured building. People from all over the Sunflower State, across America, and even a few overseas visit here annually. But coming here means the most to Derby natives, who celebrate the building's special birthday while reflecting back on a very important time in their own lives.
What we find is that people that have been in Derby for a good number of years, a lot of them went to school in this building. So there is a very intimate, personal connection to the building. They walk in and they say, "Oh yeah, that was my classroom over there."
In Derby, I'm Anthony Powell for Positively Kansas.
The Derby Historical Museum is open on Saturdays from 10 to 2, April through October. Admission is free. Do you know the fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere can be found in Kansas? And did you also know that it's closely related to the giraffe? Mike Blair takes us on a Western Kansas safari for an up-close look.
When you think of Western American wildlife, elk, mule deer, and Rocky Mountain sheep might come to mind. But don't forget about the continent speedster, the pronghorn antelope. This prairie dweller lives in plain view, but due to the vastness of grasslands and its nomadic tendencies, it's often hard to view close up. And its ability to cover lots of ground in just a few moments can quickly take it out of easy viewing range. Pronghorns are curious, but they're also skittish and quickly move away from cars and potential threats. They live in wide open spaces where their excellent vision, comparable to 8-power binoculars, misses nothing. They can see moving objects as small as a man from 4 miles away. Western Kansas is home to pronghorns, where they live on the high plains. Their societies are basically female-driven, where does with their fawns may join together at times in herds with noticeable pecking orders. Bucks tend to be solitary until mating season, which occurs in early fall. Then the largest males fight and gather harems of does in September. Later, they may join with large wintering herds until spring. Pronghorns are the fastest land animal in the Western Hemisphere, with oversized hearts, lungs, and windpipes that allow astonishing sustained speeds. They have been clocked at more than 60 miles per hour in short bursts, and they can maintain speeds of 35 miles per hour for up to 4 miles, far exceeding the abilities of any other land animal. African cheetahs may be faster in a 100-yard dash, would have no chance to catch a pronghorn except in a blind ambush. Pronghorns, handsome tan and white animals with black horns, make a wondrous sighting on the Kansas landscape. Weighing about 120 pounds, they relish forbs and weeds, choosing these even above succulent winter wheat and crops. Despite their speed, pronghorns have little jumping ability. This puts them at odds with ranchers and farmers, as they typically cross through or under fences, sometimes forcing repairs. Pronghorns, another peripheral Kansas resident where east meets west in America's heartland. I'm Mike Blair for Positively Kansas.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Positively Kansas at kpts.org is our email address if you have a question, comment, or story idea. I'm Sierra Scott. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.